I just gave you.
I'll get it pretty close. Let's say we deal out a hand of 13 cards to you for a game of bridge. What are the odds that you get all 13 cards of the same suit? I think it's one in either 60 or 600 billion. But what are the odds that you would be dealt the queen of clubs, the ace of diamonds, the two of spades, etc., just a hand that doesn't really mean a whole lot? It's the exact same odds. Saying that because something is unlikely or improbable, that it therefore couldn't happen, is absurd when we know, in fact, it did. It doesn't matter how improbable the current state of the universe is. You are judging it based on looking at the current outcome as a goal. That's not the case.
Right. Whatever hand you would get would have the same odds of having been the hand you got, no matter what hand you got, a random hand or one that was sequential.
Yeah, but you're comparing apples and oranges here.
No, I'm not. I'm comparing probabilities
in fact,
to probabilities.
It was a very good analogy. I wish I would have thought of it.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but there's a mathematical, I don't know what you will call it.
All right. Even if you were correct, even if your bald assertion that the anthropic principle of the teleological argument was evidence that there had to have been some kind of creator, that tells me nothing at all about what kind of creator there was. It doesn't tell me whether or not it is omniscient, omnipresent. It doesn't even tell me if that being still exists. It could have been something like what deists propose, a creative force that created the universe and then ceased to exist or ceased to intervene. You can't get from A to B. We tend to explain things in terms of things that are already understood. It's a bottom-up process. We understand a particular principle, and there are some things that we accept by brute force as just, this is the way it works. These are the laws of physics. Logic and math, those aren't proscriptive, they're descriptive. They describe the reality that we exist in. They are base facts. Those are your beginning points. And what you're doing is asserting that the universe can't be a brute force fact in and of itself. It must have an explanation. And then you're saying we don't need to know anything about that explanation, and it could have just been a brute force fact by itself. That doesn't fly.
Well, no, because, I mean, like, again, with gravity, we understand some things about gravity. We don't understand everything about gravity.
Right.
Like, gravity is immaterial.
But it's
an
demonstrable.
invisible force.
Yeah, but
it's demonstrable. I wouldn't call it immaterial.
It is immaterial. You can't see it.
No, it manifests in the material world.
Yes, it does. It does manifest.
It's a manifestation, then.
There you go. You're looking at gravity in operation.
Yeah, and there's a lot of invisible, immaterial things that exist in this material universe. I mean, like, so that's proof right there that immaterial things do exist.
It's not immaterial.
No. It is manifesting. Its effects are manifesting. This is like the people who call in to say that we have no evidence that the wind exists because you can't see it. No, you can see its effects.
Vision is only one form of recognizing a manifestation. There are many ways to recognize a manifestation. When I go to lift my arm, the force that pulls it back down, I'm asserting force against a force, which means that I can experience gravity every time I lift a hand.
So what's your manifestation of God?
Well, I have more evidence. I don't think I have the time, but what I can say is
how can you have more evidence when you haven't offered any at all yet?
No, because you reject my evidence.
That's correct.
Yeah,
I reject
the problem.
I reject the things that you assert as evidence, and here's why.
Yeah, but see, here's
why. Here's why, and I'll promise I'll let you answer this. Can you give me a piece of evidence, any piece of evidence, that would support your belief about a God that doesn't support some other opposing belief about a God? That's the thing about evidence, is it not only if we're talking about whether or not something exists, we need to be able to demonstrate that it manifests in some way, because that which does not manifest is indistinguishable from things that don't exist. But the evidence that you offer has to be distinct. It's like people who claim, I prayed to God and I got better. Okay, that's anecdotal evidence, and the reason it can't be used as proof of your God or of your specific God is because people can make that claim for multiple different gods, and some people who make that claim, when we investigate for things like this, we find out that there's no evidence behind that there is a God who intervened. They were on medication or whatever, or went into remission. So what we need is a piece of evidence that is distinct. For example, that is an observable manifestation of gravity. we can then begin to measure and analyze that. Is there any distinct piece of evidence to support your belief in a God? And if not, why do you get to make a special exemption for that belief as opposed to the others?
Well, that's the problem. I mean, you can't pigeonhole God into the physical universe. I mean, like, I'll try my best to answer your question. I guess it will have to be creation, and I know there's alternate explanations, like
what justification do you have for calling it creation? I mean, I hate to keep stopping you as soon as you get started, but every bit of terminology that you use is assuming the very thing that you're trying to prove.
All right, well, we can call it origins, which is plain semantics
okay.
here, like origins of the universe.
Okay, the origins of the universe. How is that evidence for God? How is it a manifestation of God?
Well, because you need the immovable mover, again.
No, you don't. Goodbye. You didn't give any evidence. You just offered an assertion that you need an immovable mover.
I just want to say one thing, and I wish I don't know how to make this clear, but getting people to say that, hey, you know, it does, even if you were to call and convince me that, you know, it does seem like maybe this would need something to get it rolling, we haven't really demonstrated anything. Getting people to agree with you that the universe requires a designer doesn't illustrate anything. That's not evidence. That's just simply getting people to agree with you about something. Getting people to agree with me that something I think is logical doesn't mean that what I think is right. When people try to use logic to prove that something exists, I'm sorry, but in some ways it's almost like a waste of time, because unless you're going to get to a point where you're actually going to verify and demonstrate the thing exists, then we're just spinning wheels, and it's just like mental masturbation. I don't know what else to call it.
Yeah.
You're sitting around, and we'll sit around, and, okay, you know, this and this and this, and even if you totally convince me that, yes, this requires a creator, all we've done is now we agree it requires a creator. Well, how do we know we're right? How do we demonstrate we're right? We don't know whether or not what we believe is actually true, or what we're thinking we should believe is actually true. And the only way to demonstrate it would be to find some way to demonstrate it. And if you're not going to get down to it eventually and say, you know, I'm going to get off my logic horse here, and I'm going to actually get to where I'm demonstrating that what I'm saying is for real, then it's a waste of time. The arguments for God, to me, are kind of a waste of time. The apologetics are like a waste of time. I want to see the measurable manifestation of what you're talking about, because that would be something. And if you don't have a measurable manifestation, you don't have something, you have nothing. And I'm not going to label nothing as God just because someone tells me that I should.
Yeah, and to slightly depart from what Tracy's saying, I'm fine with somebody demonstrating something logically. The problem is that you need to, and I don't know why we should need to explain this at all. The basic foundational principle of logic is the exclusive or. It's either A or not A, and those are the only two options that there can possibly be. This is the foundation of logic and reason. And from that point, you can construct a logical syllogism that is both valid and sound, and if you don't know the difference, look it up. You can actually go to ironchariots.org, the nice wiki that myself and Russell and many of the fans of the show have put together, and it talks about validity and soundness in syllogisms. Yet there has not been a single logical syllogism in the entire history of humankind that is both valid and sound and demonstrates the existence of a God. They all fail with some logical fallacy or another, or they make a premise that is unsupported, and therefore it makes them unsound. And I would say that if we had a logical syllogism that we could demonstrate was both valid and sound, and the premises were true, that logic tells us that the conclusion must be true, even if we couldn't, as Tracy pointed out, identify the manifestation. The problem is that when we're talking about things and determining what exists and what doesn't exist, Tracy's right. Normally, we begin, first of all, with an observation and try to come up with an explanation for it. And we tend to explain
What's
things.
causing this?
Yes. And so, in this case, the observation is existence. What caused existence?
And that begs the question of whether or not existence requires an explanation.
Yeah.
And that is not known.
Yeah.
That is not a given.
You need to begin by demonstrating that the universe could not have always existed in some form, which tends to be mostly consistent with, plus, you get the problem with the laws of physics breaking down and time and blah, 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 and it's way too much to get into.